So the Imam begins in this next section of the chapter, and he says that seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim, as was reported on the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim, that seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim, has been reported in Musnad of Imam Ahmad. And so there are numerous opinions as to what type of knowledge is obligatory, or what is being referred to in this particular hadith. And so the fuqaha, the jurists of Islam, they claim that what is understood by this is the knowledge of fiqh. Of course, the fuqaha, they're going to choose their specialty, and that is jurisprudence. Because with the knowledge of fiqh, you know what is halal and what is haram. Then you have al-mufassirun wal-muhaddithun, the scholars of the Quran in tafsir and the scholars of sunnah in hadith. And they said, what do you think? Knowledge is the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because with those two things, you can be connected with all other knowledges and sciences. And then the mystics, they said that knowledge is referring to ikhlas, sincerity, and the diseases of the heart or the soul. The last one that he mentions here are the scholars of theoretical theology, or theological rhetoric, I should say, al-mutakallimun. And they, of course, said that knowledge is ilmul kalam, which is the knowledge of theological rhetoric. Right? So everyone kind of took their field of interest or specialty and claimed or understood that what they were pursuing was referred to here as the obligatory knowledge. However, and of course there are numerous other opinions about this, but Imam Ibn Qudamah here, al-Maqdisi, Abul Abbas, he says, none of these have really, met the mark, if you will. But what is for sure, and what is certain, is that knowledge is an exchange or an interchange with your Lord, an exchange of the servant with his Lord, and that is what is obligatory. Basically, this mu'amala, or this exchange or interchange, it is what you have been obliged to do. It's what you've become responsible for. And there are three categories to this. The first is called i'tiqad, which is your doctrine or your belief. The second is your actions. And then the third category are the things that you stay away from. So what you believe, what you do, and what you don't do. That is what knowledge encompasses. When the Prophet ﷺ, he said that seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. So the first thing he says, in order, if you will, of what should be done first, and he gives the example of a young child when they reach the age of puberty. What's the first thing that they have to learn? The first obligation is that they learn the Shahada, that they learn ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger and servant, and that they understand the meaning of this Shahada. And even if they did not understand it based on evidence, right, looking into the evidence, looking into the proof for this, that is fine as the fulfillment of this initial obligation. The Prophet ﷺ would have the Bedouin Arabs understand the Shahada without having to delve into the depths of evidence and argument. He would simply have them understand what it means, and they would accept it, and that would be the fulfillment of their first obligation. And then after that, you can begin to investigate, to better understand the meanings based on evidence. And of course, this is something that each and every one of us is obliged to know the meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. And if we don't know it based on the evidences of what we can find in the sources of our faith, then initially just understanding the meaning of them is sufficient to fulfill that obligation. He goes on in order or sequence. He says when the prayer comes in, it's time for prayer, the next obligation is what? To make wudu, how to make tahara, right? As a prerequisite for prayer, because prayer is obligatory. And so you have to learn how to make wudu or make tahara, and then how to pray. And then if you live long enough to witness the month of Ramadan, obviously you're obliged to learn how to fast. And then if you come into possession of money at some point, then you have that money for the duration of an entire lunar year, then you have to learn about zakat. And then when Hajj rolls around and you have the capability, then you're obliged to learn how to perform the rites of Hajj. And this is the obligatory nature of knowledge. You're obliged to learn what you need to know in order to fulfill your religious duties. As for the things that you don't do, the things that you stay away from, then this is based on your condition and what you are experiencing in your life. So for example, the blind person is not obliged to learn about things he shouldn't be looking at because he has not the sight to see them anyway. The mute person, the one that doesn't speak, is not obliged to learn about the things they should not be saying because they have not the ability to do so anyway. If, for example, in your country you find that drinking alcohol is widespread, then you have to learn about its impermissibility. Or wearing silk clothing for men, real silk clothing, not the manufactured type, but real silk clothing for men. If that's something that's prevalent in your society, well then you have to learn the religious ruling of that. And various other things that may pop up that you're obliged to learn about before you embark upon them. You should have some idea. Is this permissible, is halal, or is this impermissible, haram? You need to inquire as to, what the religious ruling is so that you can be involved in a healthy exchange or interchange, if you will, with your Lord, so that you're not doing something that is displeasing. And then as for the i'tiqad, or the doctrine or belief, then you're obliged to learn enough that you can repel any doubts that may come into your mind about your belief in Allah, your belief in the angels, in the books, in the messengers, your belief in the last day, your belief in the divine decree, and then various other beliefs that you hold as doctrine about, the resurrection, about the grave, etc. So you're obliged to learn enough that you're able to withstand doubts, that you're able to persevere through, possible things that could come into the mind that make you doubt. So you have to understand the meanings of the doctrine, and you have to also, and that includes the Shahada, learning enough to remove those doubts from your mind. So one thing, for example, if you live in an area that is it's running rampant with innovation, then you need to learn enough to understand that the nature of this doctrine or this action is an innovation and what is the correct belief or way. You have to seek that knowledge from those that are trustworthy and know. And this is what is meant by the obligatory nature of knowledge when it comes to individuals. Each one of us is obliged to learn a certain amount based on our current condition, what it is that we come in contact with, and what it is that we believe. As for communal obligation, what our community should learn as a whole, right? Which means it's not obligatory that every single one of us learn that. Then those are the types of things that we just can't do without from our worldly life. Like medicine, for example. Imam Ibn Qudamah, he mentions medicine here as an absolute necessity. He also mentions mathematics as a necessity. Medicine is what helps preserve health and keep the body in good shape when needed. And mathematics is also a very, very important study, because he says this is what's used to divide your estate when you pass away, how to handle your inheritance, and how to divvy up, various recommendations in your will. Also, if a country were to, or a community to be without these types of without this type of knowledge, then it would put them in a hardship. They would be burdened. So if one person from the community attains that knowledge and can benefit the community with it, then they fulfill the obligation. And we can look at the various other fields of study that we require in our daily lives, and we could say that this is obligatory upon the community to know. So someone from the community has to take the initiative to learn that in order to benefit the community. So that could be anything and everything within the realm of permissibility and obviously usability, or what's necessary. So the Islamic knowledge, of course, is all of its sciences, regardless whether it is useful to the common person or not. It is all considered praiseworthy, and it is divided into a couple of things. Number one is primary knowledge, secondary knowledge, prerequisites, and what we could call finishing knowledge, or finishings, or finery of knowledge. So you have usul, furu', muqaddimat, and mutammimat. So these four types. So the first, primary knowledge is talking about the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the consensus of the Ummah al-Ijma'a, and then the narrations and traditions of the companions. The secondary knowledge is what is understood from primary sources. How do you understand the Quran and Sunnah and the Ijma' or consensus? How do you understand the companions' traditions and practices? To understand the meanings of that is considered a secondary type of knowledge, and this would be like fiqh. And this is where these schools of thought, or the madhab, they come into play, because they help you understand and guide you to being able to practically apply the Quran and the Sunnah. And in our context, if it were not for that, then the majority of us would be lost in determining what to do and how to go about things. The next one is muqaddimat, which are like prerequisites, and this has to do with tools that are required to learn, like grammar, morphology, learning language. These are the different tools that you need to be able to access the Quran and to access the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then lastly, he concludes with the finery, if you will, or the finishings of knowledge. And that is like ilm al-qira'at, like learning about the various recitations of the Quran. Right? This is considered a finishing, if you will. Or perfecting makharij al-huruf, the precise manner of articulating the letters in the Arabic language for the purpose of reciting the Quran. Or learning about the names of the narrators of hadith, and learning about their condition, if they're trustworthy or they tend to forget, or if they fabricate. Those are the different types of finishing subjects when it comes to Islamic sciences. And of course, all of those four categories and everything that falls in them is a praiseworthy pursuit. And that's where we'll wrap it up.